In this video, I'm going to teach you about learning, practicing, and using intervals in a way that specifically makes sense for guitar players. I'll be teaching you how to see them on the guitar, and then I'll give you practical examples on how to use that skill to actually create music. If you're watching this video, there are songs in your head that you might not be able to access, but this here is one of the most fundamental keys to unlocking those songs in your head for the rest of us to hear. Intervals can be thought of as simply the distance between two notes. We can measure that distance by steps. So a whole step on the guitar is 2 frets, a half step is 1 fret. So if we have, for example, an A and a C, these two notes, A and C, are 1.5 steps apart. So we can bank that information. Two notes that are 1.5 steps apart are always going to have that same harmonic characteristic. So let's say D and F, or B and D. The notes might be changing, but the overall feeling that distance between two notes gives us is the same. We only have 12 notes in music, which means there's a finite number of these two note combinations. If we just learn how to reference them, how to see them, and understand how they intrinsically sound, we can make way better creative choices when we're songwriting. The smallest interval that we can have is 0 steps, the unison. If we go up from there, we have two notes that are a half step apart. Then we have two notes that are a whole step, then a step and a half, and so on. 2 steps, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, and then 6. There are literally no other combinations of notes. It's just those. So let's talk a bit about navigating this on the fretboard and how to develop fluency in this skill. For every interval that we have, every two note combination, there's always going to be a location of that note to the right of your root, so towards the body of the guitar, and to the left, towards the headstock. The interval to the left is always going to be 1 string higher than the interval to the right. So again, I have B to C sharp, a whole step. That same note is found to the left, right here. I want to know both locations equally as fluently. The only type of interval that doesn't have a second location are what I call stacked intervals, where the shape is 2 different strings, but they share a fret. Technically speaking, we could play it somewhere else, but that would require us to reach 6 frets. Now, as soon as we reach 6 frets, we're beyond a typical position on the guitar, which is either 4 or 5 fret widths. Focus on intervals that are no wider than 5 frets first. I have listed here a PDF of all of the intervals you need to know. You can download this PDF for free. Just go to the description of this video, click the link, and go to the shop section on my website. For right now, we're going to be using B, or fret 7 on string 6, as the root. An interval always has a low note and a high note, and for now, the lowest note will always be considered the root, and then we measure the distance from the root to the higher note in a shape and in sound. To fully understand intervals, there are a couple different things you want to know. One, what is it called? 2, what is the shape? 3, objectively, how does it sound? And that's it. So if you look at this PDF, you'll notice that I use the label R to indicate root, and then a number to indicate the type of interval that the shape creates. If the interval number is just a number, as in there's no flat or sharp attached to it, it's either a major or a perfect interval. Think of major and perfect as the same thing, but perfect a little bit fancy for some reason. I'm not going to get into why, it just is. The intervals that are perfect are the 4th, the 5th, and the octave, the full 8. If it's a number without a sharp or a flat, but it's anything other than 4, 5, or 8, it's going to be major. We'll be skipping over all of the intervals that have flats or sharps for now and just focusing on the major or perfect intervals. So the first major interval is the major second. a whole step away. So that's located a whole step up on the same string, or 4 frets back up a string to the left. Now if we go to the major third, 2 whole steps, that's also located to the left, up a string. Notice how the distance between the major second and the major third is just a whole step. Same thing here, whole step up gives you your major third to the left. Now we get our first stacked interval, the perfect fourth, and then everyone's favorite, the power chord, perfect fifth. I want to stop for a moment here and explain something called interval archetypes. This is a concept I came up with to help me memorize these more quickly. If you look at the major second, that whole step distance, and then the perfect fifth, they're the same fret distance away from your index finger. The only difference is that one is up a string and one is on the same string. Now, if you look at the leftward interval, okay, so here, major second up to the left. Now, perfect fifth up is the same distance to the left, up a string. So interval archetypes are the same shape, and the same shapes will have the same flipped shape on the other side. Any interval that's located a whole step up to the right is that same 4 fret distance to the left, up a string. So the octave is also that shape, same shape to the left. If we go to the major third, and we look at its leftward interval, that same shape will be the major sixth to the left. The last one, before the octave, major 7. Now, if we recall this major second shape, that archetype was this shape to the left. This is 1 fret less, 1 fret to the left, meaning that shape will have to just get pushed 1 back. Up a string, push it back, there's your note. Lastly, perfect octave, perfect octave. I would start here for now, just get really, really confident with those shapes. Every day, pick a different root. Initially, start just on string 6, go through the numbers. Major second, major third, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, perfect octave. Intervals can be shrunk by a half step or expanded by a half step. Shrinking a major interval or a perfect interval changes its quality. Major intervals, when shrunk, become minor. Perfect intervals, when shrunk, become diminished. So if we take a major second, shrink it by a half step, it becomes a minor second. In the chart, the PDF here, that's what the flat before the 2 represents. It's a minor second, and the regular 2 is major second. Now for the perfect intervals, let's take the perfect fifth. If we put a flat on that and shrink it, it's a diminished fifth now. Expanding an interval makes it augmented. The only one that really matters for us is the augmented fourth. So here's a perfect fourth. Sharp 4 would be augmented fourth. A quick sidebar, the diminished fifth and augmented fourth, they're the same notes, right? The same sound. Why do they have 2 different names? Context, spelling. What makes this a fifth is the fact that there are 5 notes or 5 letters between those 2 notes. So it's a B and an F sharp. B, C, D, E. F sharp is 5. B and E, or B and E sharp, which is a real thing by the way, is B, C, D, E. 4 letters. So it's a fourth. It's the same thing as the English equivalent of the 3 different theirs that we have. They're playing guitar, or he's playing their guitar, or she's playing guitar over there. Different spellings, same sound. So if we go in order, major second, we have the minor second. Same interval archetype as major 7th, 5 frets left, minor second. Okay, major third gets shrunk to minor third, flat 3. Perfect fourth gets expanded to augmented fourth. Perfect fifth gets shrunk to diminished fifth. Same sounds, same locations. Major sixth gets shrunk to minor sixth. So see how that was the same interval archetype as the minor third? Same shape, up a string. Okay, minor seventh. It's a stacked interval. We only have 1. And then perfect octave. We can't adjust this one because if we shrink it, it's just a major 7th. If we expand it, it's just a minor 9th, which is minor 2nd, an octave up. Okay, now let's talk about string sets. A string set is the amount of strings it takes you to play any given shape. So a minor third, for example, like this, is just a string set of 1, because it takes 1 string to play that shape. To play that shape on other strings, you just move it to a new string and play that same shape. The leftward minor third is a 2-string set. It takes 2 adjacent strings to play that shape. To move it, same shape, 2 different strings. But then when you get to string 3 and 2, the tuning is different, so we have to take that shape and bump it up a fret to get the same sound. And then string 2 and 1 have the same shape. For every interval combination, every interval shape, you want to be able to visualize it on every string set possible. So the way I think about this is the widest shapes we have, with string 6 being the root, octave. It takes us 4 strings to play these shapes, meaning set 6 would include these 4 strings, 6, 5, 4, and 3. Set 5 would include these 4, 5, 4, 3, and 2. Now I'm talking string numbers, not frets. Set 4 would be strings 4, 3, 2, and 1. So once you get really good at visualizing your intervals with string 6 as the root, do the same thing from string 5, taking into consideration the tuning difference from string 3 to 2. I'll just go through the major intervals: major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, perfect fifth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh. Now, here's the first time we're going to have to use string 2. So that leftward interval would normally be 5 frets apart. Because of the tuning difference, we simply bump it up 1. Major seventh, perfect octave, again, would usually be here, but because of the tuning difference, we bump it up, perfect octave. Okay, set 4, do the same thing. Major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth. Perfect fifth would usually be here, bump it up. Major sixth would usually be here, bump it up. Major seventh would usually be here, bump it up. To the left. So this is kind of like math, things carry. Even though we're going to string 1, the tuning change from string 3 to 2 still happened, so we have to carry that same mentality forward. So major seventh would usually be this shape to the left, bump it up 1. There it is. Perfect octave, again bumped up from where it usually is, would normally be here, bump it up. There's the shape. So practice all these interval shapes on all 3 of those string sets, string 6, string 5, string 4. Get used to the shapes, get used to seeing them, get used to hearing them. So we want to learn how to actually use these intervals to create music. Now I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide on how to do that by showing you the riff that I created using the same process. So here's that riff. To use intervals in your creative practice, you want to do the following. 1, pick a riff or pick a part of a song that you really like. 2, learn how to play it. For my example, I'm going to be using a riff from the song Hessian Peel by the band Opeth. The riff goes like this. Okay, so what you're going to do once you have the thing, the riff or the part of song that you want to learn and you've learned it, identify the notes one by one, going from the lowest note to the highest note. So in this case, E is the lowest note. Then we have A, B flat, there's a C, D flat, D sharp, and then E again. As the riff goes up, we have some other notes. So we have a G, and then we have, that's an F. If you arrange those notes in alphabetical order, starting from the low E, E, F, G, A, B flat, C, D flat, D sharp, E. And you end up with this really cool scale. You'll find this with any riff you learn. If you just identify the intervals from the lowest note, you get all of the sounds they used to create that riff. What you do next is you experiment by taking those intervallic shapes and applying them all over the guitar neck. Think scales, think arpeggios, think chord shapes. At this point, it's like research. You're just experimenting, finding new shapes with those notes and those intervals all over the guitar neck, and you're ignoring all other intervals. Now, because there are so many in this riff, I want to narrow it down even further. So for the riff, I'm only actually going to be using intervals from this part of the riff. So that's the A, B flat, C, D flat, and D sharp, along with the E root. Where I usually start is first position, and then I'll kind of sequence it from there. So the scale here, E jumps right to A, B flat, C, D flat, D sharp, E. And then you continue from there. E, A, B flat, C, D flat, D sharp, E. So all the way up. And you can hear, even as I'm just playing the scale, I'm basically playing the average emotion, the average feeling of that riff, because the intervals create the feeling. Control the intervals, control the feeling. For the riff that I actually wrote, I ended up on these shapes, these combos of notes. I started with this chord, which is the D flat in an octave with a B flat in the middle, creating a chord. From there, I could see that, okay, there's an A a half step below that B flat, creating a new chord with a very subtle but powerful chord change. And now this little riff here, E, B flat, pulling off to A, D flat, pulling off to A. Again, all just notes from that small group that we started with. Okay, then I just dropped that chord down a half step. So we have the C from the riff, the A from the riff. With this chord, I started a motive where I changed just one note of the shape. I do the same thing here, but I do it on the low note. So I change that C to D flat, adding a bit of tension before resolving it. I find that having this chord shape consistent across both parts of the riff help bind it together. Then I added this fill. Again, these are just shapes from those notes. A, B flat, C, D flat. And then I build that into a larger chord with A at the top, C, D flat, A. And then I slide that down to E. And then I live here for a bit. So I found these really cool shapes. We have A, E, a really stable sound. And then I just start changing one note at a time through the notes that we discovered in the scale shape. D sharp, C, B flat from here. And then from that A, I let go, hammer on to D flat, E, and then two E's to round it off, and it all loops. And then that's the riff. It sounds like Opeth because I'm using literally the same intervals, even in the same key. I didn't change the key at all. But by applying them in my own unique way, it's not plagiarism, it's taking the influence, the sound, the feeling of what you like, and making your own music with it. The only limit is your own creativity. You could do this by taking, the notes and intervals of one song you love and the techniques or the guitar shapes of another song, combine them. You combine the rhythm of another song you like, or the tones they use in another song that you like. The more of these you combine together, the more you obscure the sources and the more unique the song you create ends up becoming. And then for fun, just because I couldn't resist, I threw a little solo on top. I did essentially the exact same thing, but I expanded my note choices to include the G and the F, creating that whole scale. So I had a few more notes to work with. Those still sat very nicely on top of the riff notes because it's from that same family of intervals that we started with. So that whole scale would be E, F, G, A, B flat, C, D flat, D sharp, E. And then that solo goes like this. So learning to harness this power and see it in the music that you love will help you make more objective choices in your own songwriting.